Hey guys, welcome back to the Retro Gamer Guys Christmas special. So far, to recap from the previous video, Excalibur 2097 on the Super Nintendo by Activision has made the best list so far and is on the nice list. Followed by a very meh game by Titus. Say that in front of your great elementary school English teacher. It was a very meh game, Zelda clone, but still had its moments. And then, of course, the big stocking stuffer turned Knight Rider and WWF Super WrestleMania. Which, after a small rampage I went on after reviewing and playing that game, I am now legally bound in the state of Oklahoma to warn anybody whenever I move into a new neighborhood. Oklahoma. Well, let's see what else we have. Wrap up this crap fest. Let's hope that I get something better this time. Let's see here. Something good. Alright, jumping over to the disc section. Looks like we got on the PlayStation 1 Tiny Toon Adventures Plucky's Big Adventure. Now, I don't know how many Tiny Toons Adventures fans there are, but for me personally, I really enjoy the cartoon. It's a great Steven Spielberg production. He made it. It's a really fun show. It really takes the Looney Tunes formula and runs with it. And overall, I really enjoy it. Every now and then, it's on the hub, I believe. So if you enjoy the cartoon like I do, it's over there. And so the wacky antics and whatnot make for a perfect comical little video game. So let's see what the back has to say. Plucky forgot to do his homework again, and now he's in big trouble. He needs your help to build a time machine that will take him back to the past and make things right. Play as Plucky Duck, Buster Bunny, Babs Bunny, or Hampton, and get ready to save the day. Or at least Plucky's behind. Collect equipment to solve puzzles, play as different Tiny Toons characters, explore 20 different environments, side-splitting fun for the whole family. Well, already I can feel a problem with this. I mean, who needs a time machine to go back to save your homework? I mean, honestly, like if I ever have a homework assignment a day or two late, if I was sick or something, the teachers are fine and give me a couple, maybe take off a couple points for the lateness, but are usually very accepting and glad I got the work in. So, I can already tell you that Plucky's overreacting a bit, but let's see if the game can further our experience. Alright, so yeah, I'm technically cheating here. I'm not using an original PlayStation. I am using a PlayStation 3. But I mean, do you blame me? You spend $400 on this machine, it better run PlayStation 1. Okay, aside from the atrocious storyline of what we have of the game, the very first thing you do in this supposed kids game is read through tons of text. Luckily it scrolls fast enough and you can skip it, but still, the last thing you want to do in a kids game, especially one that's geared towards kind of younger kids and introductory level kids into video games, is give them tons of text to read. Like, imagine if you turned on, say, Sesame Street, and then you were asked to read War and Peace. It just wouldn't fit. But anyway, the graphics are not really bad, but they're not as good, but still, this is the PlayStation 1 we're talking about, so I'll give it a little slack. Along the way, it's a pretty decent control for a point-and-click game, and you're given a bunch of these different jokes and whatnot from the different characters you play as, and while a good deal of them are pretty funny and did make me laugh, some are just god-awful and making you want to rip your ears out. Especially the trademark "What's that" thing. I mean, can we let that die already? Overall, it's a very mediocre game. And it's really kind of less than mediocre because a bunch of the other games based off the Looney Tunes series have been awesome and really good. Even ones based off Tiny Toon Adventures have been good. And so it's like going from a piece made by Mozart to something a 7th grader made on the internet. It's still music, but one's clearly better than the other, and one clearly had more time devoted to it. Overall, it's hard to give this game much more than a 4. I don't really suggest picking this up, but I mean, if you get it in the mail miraculously, pop it in for a couple minutes. I've noticed that the experience changes based on the person, but generally, it's not much more than mediocre. Well, obviously the awesome show did not translate well to an early 3D point-and-click adventure. I mean, the game tries hard, but there's just way too much text thrown at you, and it's just overly simple and kind of boring at times. I mean, they constantly talk, and sure, some of it's funny and humorous, and it's not that bad. It's still a very dull experience. That definitely should have been a lot better. At least it's not as bad as Knight Rider, but it's making the naughty list. Alright, let's see what's next. Jumping to the Xbox, we have, oh great, Grabbed by the Ghoulies by Rare. Now, on the box, right here it says, from the creators of Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie. Now that may be true, but I think everybody knows by now that once they jump ship from Nintendo to Xbox, their games didn't carry over well. The new Perfect Dark game for the 360 was barf-worthy. The new Banjo-Kazooie game was just crap. And many people consider this one of the sinking ships for Rare. But, I mean, how bad can it be? But first, I think to really talk about this game, we have to give it a little background. Originally, this game was developed for the GameCube. And so, for those of you that don't know what a GameCube disc looks like, and if you don't, they're about this size. Okay, very small. It's almost just barely bigger, if not about the same. Yeah, barely bigger than a PSP disc. And so then it was pretty much being made for a disc this size, which can hold a couple gigabytes of data, and is jumping ship to this. Just the size alone should show you where the problem comes in. So, let's see what is considered one of the nails in the coffin for Rare, one of the first nails in the coffin specifically, as just a bad game, according to most, and also being programmed for a disc of this size, and then having to make the jump to Xbox. Let's see how that fares for our good pals at Rare. Alright, just for one last final comparison. Here's the GameCube. I mean, you can really fit this in my hand, but I mean, I have big hands, and it has a handle. And then here's the behemoth of a console that the Xbox is. So you're programming from here to here. I have a feeling that it's gonna end up being some of the problems that people that started out programming for a console such as, say, here, the Genesis, and then try to immediately make a jump to, like, the Dreamcast. It's just technology-wise, it's a huge difference. But I digress. Let's pop this in and really see what Rare can do. So, Grabbed by the Ghoulies is, as I already said, kind of the last nail in the coffin for the downfall of Rare. Now, it's not total garbage, okay? But it definitely is the first decline, because the only thing you can really say about this game is it's okay. For starters, the audio is very, very bad. Now, like I said, this is mainly due to it originally being on the GameCube and then jumping ship to the Xbox. And another thing that really annoys me is the controls. Now, It controls okay except for one little thing. You attack with the analog stick and change the cameras with the bumpers, right and left. It's like you have to run into your enemy or use the analog stick to go in the direction of your enemy in order to attack. That should be like the A or B button or something, not the analog stick. That's what you use to control it or move the camera, and also not the bumpers. But you also, that's okay. It's a very minor noise, and you catch on to it after a while. And it has some of that rare charm, but not as much. You can definitely tell that this is the first one where they were under Microsoft and not Nintendo's wing. It still has a lot of fun to it, but just it's so far away from the original Super Nintendo and N64 classics that it's almost unrecognizable. I mean, it's a good game and enjoyable, but it's just hard to believe that Rare made this game, especially when it's so linear and there's not a whole lot to collect when comparing it to such unlinear and collectathon-ish games such as Banjo-Kazooie. Overall, I would give this game maybe a 6 or 7, which is something I never thought I'd give a Rare game. If you have played any other Rare games, I encourage you to play that before you play this. But if you're really interested in seeing possibly the last step in a good game for Rare, check it out. Well, I gotta say, it's not as bad as some people claim. I had a good bit of enjoyment out of it, and it's definitely a game that I think I'll come back to and probably most likely finish the whole story and whatnot in the game, and it did provide me with some entertainment, but I can definitely see why this is kind of the downhill slope from here for Rare. Donkey Kong Country is one of my favorite games of all time, and Banjo-Kazooie is one of my favorite games for the N64. So if you have those kind of games in your repertoire, and then you make an Xbox game that was like, again, sounding like a broke record here, but made for the GameCube, you just obviously, you obviously should think that it would be a slam dunk for them. This kind of game seems great, but it turns out to be a slam, I don't know, what's bad? I don't know, some basketball term. So, out of the goodness of my heart, I'm going to put this ahead of Hercules and put it on the semi-nice list. Alright, 2 games to go. Let's see what we get. Going back to the cartridge days. Superman for Game Boy. So, Superman has a pretty bad reputation for games. Superman 64 is considered one of the worst of all time. There's not a whole lot of really awesome Superman games. I mean, like, it kind of suffers the same fate as Batman does. He had a lot of crappy games under his title, but most people can still reference the original NES game as a great game. Batman Returns on the Super Nintendo is really great. And, of course, the Arkham series is just a slam dunk category. Except for, of course, Origins, which I didn't hate, as my video about it might have suggested, but I still felt let me down. But Superman does not have an Arkham or an NES or whatever to go back to. So, will this be Superman's final hope? Let's see. Alright, at least I can say the fat man didn't bring me the 64 version. Will this be any better? Well, it's at least divisible by 8 from 64 for 8 bits. So it has to be at least 1/8 of the game that Superman 64 was. So our chances are looking pretty good right now. Okay, so we all know that Superman 64 sucks very badly. So does the Game Boy version fare any better? Well, not exactly. Sure, you're not flying through rings, but it still has a bunch of the same problems. For one thing, the graphics. Now, I understand this is Game Boy and whatnot, yada yada yada, but you could still take a little effort. They're not that so bad that it's unrecognizable, but it still just doesn't feel directly right. It just feels just kind of weird for some reason. It might just be me. And also, the controls just seem weird. Flying is very awkward and really stiff, and it just feels like walking is a better solution, which is something you do not want from a Superman game. It's like, imagine if you had played a Batman game where you would rather just punch people instead of throwing batarangs. It would take away the flagship part of your character. I mean, it's ridiculous, and like I said, it just takes a lot of... It's just exasperating and really puke-worthy trying to fly. The attacks, you take a couple of hits to kill enemies, and bullets affect you. Two things wrong with that. First, Superman does hold back, but in this situation, I think he can hold back just enough so one punch takes away the enemies. And two, he's the Man of Steel. He bounces, bullets bounce off of him like he's a rubber band. I mean, is it that? If you've seen any movie or any comic book, you should know this. There's even a scene in Superman 2 that deliberately shows this, where they have a bullet go into his eye. And it just crunches up and bounces off, just to show that he can stop bullets. This game is gonna make me have to buy some Advil. But overall, it's very monotonous, very boring, very cringeworthy, and just barely shaves off. It does have playability at some point, but it just barely shaves off being better than Knight Rider and WrestleMania. Oh god, I need to throw up. Well, when I said it was 1/8 of the game the N64 version was, I wasn't lying. What a monotonous, boring experience. Well, it's not really as bad as the N64 version, and the graphics are pretty nice looking, and the action is pretty cool. It's just so boring fighting the same enemy. And it just doesn't really feel like Superman. There's so much more that could have been done with this. But it still has a few holding values, so I'll put it just in front of Plucky's Big Adventure, but behind Hercules. Well, I have one more game from Santa so far. Excalibur 2097 on the Super Nintendo, followed by Grabbed by the Ghoulies on Xbox, then Hercules on N64, Superman on Game Boy, Plucky's Big Adventure on PS1, Knight Rider by Acclaim on NES, and the one that shall not be named over there. So, let's see if we finish this off with a turd or a clap. High note. I couldn't think of something that rhymes with turd off the top of my head. It's a Wii U game, and one of my first Wii U games, Game & Wario. Now, the other Wario games, for such as the DS and Wii, are instant classics that almost everybody I know loves and enjoys. And so when they really showed off the capabilities of each system very well. Like, for instance, the Wii showed off the motion controls, and the DS version showed off, of course, the stylus and the two screens and whatnot, and the portability of it. So when I first heard that this game was coming to the Wii U, I thought, man, this is great. It'll be a perfect game to show off the gamepad's playability. And so I was kind of intrigued as why there wasn't more talk about this game. But let's find out. Game & Wario on Wii U. Alright, let's pop this baby in and finish up this Christmas special. Happy holidays. Okay, to be honest, I had a long, drawn-out discussion about each game and whatnot, and it was probably going to come to a very long review, and I didn't want to interrupt the flow of this video. So, in the spirit of not interrupting the flow, I decided to just instead play some of the parts from the game trailer review, which was very concise and very close to my opinions, and it gives a good overview of all the games, and I will definitely include a link to the original video and their channel below, so please check those out and enjoy an actual professional's video.
Mario's frequently flatulent alter ego makes his Wii U debut in yet another quirky collection of minigames, this time bringing the system's touchscreen gamepad to center stage. While prior Wario-branded collections typically packed a multitude of bite-sized games, Game & Wario requires a slightly longer attention span, offering up just over a dozen games that strive for a bit more depth and complexity. The end result is a few shining moments of brilliance in a collection that otherwise barely feels par for the course. Drawn by the allure of potential profits, Wario decides to try his hand at making the best video game ever. That's as far as the silly, self-referential plot goes, setting up a loose context for a grab bag of minigames that have you run the gamut of tilt, tap, and wipe controls to accomplish the goals. A lot of it feels like business as usual for the mustachioed mad mogul, but the highlights of Game & Wario are the few games that make imaginative use of the new hardware. One memorable challenge puts you in the shoes of a journalist voyeuristically snapping photos of specific targets in a bustling city street or a crowded theatrical show. The busy environments display on your television while the gamepad shows the view through your camera, and you'll have to physically pan the gamepad around to take your snapshots. It works surprisingly well, and glancing between both screens feels surprisingly natural. The best game of the entire collection throws players into the relatable scenario of sneaking in some late-night gaming goodness while hiding from the disapproving gaze of a parental enforcer. Your bedroom's layout is shown on the television while the gamepad literally has you playing a downsized version of WarioWare, adding a thick layer of tension to the already frantic nature of the game. It does an exemplary job balancing your attention between screens, a feat that is unfortunately rarely replicated in the rest of the games. In fact, some challenges really underutilize the hardware and truly feel out of place, including a puzzle game that's reminiscent of something you'd play for free in a browser or mobile app. Other games simply mirror the game to both screens, abandoning the advantage of having the dual screens together and adding little value to the collection as a whole. The multiplayer modes aren't much to scream about either, since they're limited to a separate and much smaller set of games, such as a Guess the Drawing game similar to Pictionary. Rather than letting everyone play at once, most group activities require players to pass around the gamepad and take turns. It's a shame and a little baffling since Nintendo Land demonstrated the Wii U's potential for minigame multiplayer fun by allowing up to 5 simultaneous players the day the system was available. Game & Wario could come as a disappointment if you're accustomed to excellent past collections that bear the Wario moniker. While there may be a few glimpses of really clever ideas, they're overshadowed by the amount of uninspired games that don't lend themselves well to the hardware. Sorry, Wario. Guess you'll have to look for future funding through another crowdfarter.
Well, I can certainly say we ended on a high note. I really enjoyed this game, and I thought it showed off some of the gamepad's features perfectly. I really enjoy the one where you have to go around taking pictures of the ghosts and whatnot, and there's also really fun with the actual mini game where you're playing the game and watch. But, however, I do now see why this game wasn't as promoted as the Wii or DS versions of the Wario games. It does kind of fall flat of what the Wario games are supposed to be. A bunch of mini games that are just built around using your different capabilities of your system. And so the only one that really shows that off is, of course, the kid playing the Game & Watch game. It really shows off how to use the two screens and how to have a lot of fun with the Wii U. So overall, I do think that this is the deserving game for the nice list. So there you have it, folks. 8 games reviewed in a 2-part episode. Merry Christmas to all, and to all, good gaming.